Hello, everybody. It's great to see you there. Welcome to Crossy's Corner. I'm Martin Cross, and with me is the one and only Angus Groom, Olympic silver medal winner, boat race winner in 2022, and loads of stuff besides. I seem to remember an amazing single sculls result you had, just losing out to Olaf Tufte in the Europeans, was it?
Yeah, 2015.
Yeah, amazing things. We can get in and talk about all that kind of stuff. But I just wonder, just to get us into it, I know you're a scientist now and you're kind of scientist at this level, like PhD and that kind of stuff. What's a typical day in the life of a scientist these days?
Well, I think one thing to first say is that it's incredibly varied, and it kind of depends on where your projects are at. So yesterday, for example, I was doing experiments all day, and then I get the results of those experiments. And today, my day has literally just been filled with analyzing the data and coming up with the results from that. So yeah, I think it's a very varied day. So I can't say I've got a typical day, if you like.
Do you love it?
Yeah, no, it's really good fun. I think it was very different from rowing, obviously, and the world of academia is very different from, say, doing science in an industrial setting, because you're just doing your experiments and you're processing your data towards a different end. So in academia, you're literally just trying to make discoveries and publish academic papers, whereas at industry, you have to produce a product that's ultimately going to help people, I guess.
Yeah. So with all this focus on science, how strange did it feel to be pitched into the middle of boat race commentary this weekend?
Well, it was pretty nice, to be honest. I've been away from the rowing environment for probably 2 years now, for a number of reasons, which maybe we can get into later on.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It was really exciting to be part of the commentary team. I've never done commentary before, but it was really good fun. And obviously, I had yourself and Grace Prendergast experienced in the world of commentary, and so I had some brilliant help. It was great fun.
Yeah. What did you like about it?
I think you really live the race. I don't know how you feel. It's I certainly found that, if you've got to describe it to how you see it, you're kind of a lot more engaged with the race than just watching it on TV. So that's why, I don't know, I felt I was almost in the boat with the guys.
There's a lot of chatter, I don't know, on two of the WhatsApp groups I'm in, and I think on social media about the well, I won't say it's a bad-tempered fixture, but there were a lot of clashes. I mean, the guys seemed very friendly afterwards. What's your read on it nearly a week on?
So I think it's very difficult to know what to make of these fixtures. Firstly, because the opposition to the boat race crews have got very different goals to the boat race crews. I think ultimately, to the opposition, you're literally only competing for bragging rights. But for the boat race crews, it's one of your key bits of prep for the actual race itself. I think if we look on the results for the Cambridge women, I thought they did really well against Thames Rowing Club, and particularly coming back through to challenge them at the end like that. I think that's really valuable experience, and I'm sure they had two quite contrasting rowing styles, and obviously you don't really want to be changing your rowing style this close to the race, but they might just pick some lessons up from the Thames crew, and certainly from the Oxford crew. That was a lot of pressure that they got put under by the Leander boat with all the clashing. But of course, I think the boat race, or what's really nice about the boat race, is that it's so unpredictable. You can't predict what challenges you're going to get faced in the race, and even if you have a superior crew or one that's perhaps the bookie's favourite, it might not go to plan because of one reason or another, such as the clashing. And we kind of saw that a bit last year. You probably have put money on the Oxford men's crew to win, and then you had all this bad weather, and the Cambridge crew dealt with it really well. They perhaps steered a slightly cannier course than the Oxford crew, and put the pressure on the Oxford crew and forced them to make the mistake. So I think actually, from the weekend, the biggest thing that the Oxford crew can take from it was their reflections on how they reacted to the challenges being posed by that Leander crew.
Yeah, I've heard from, one or two people that were looking at the fixture and expecting like this Leander crew to be amazing, and they were kind of a bit disappointed. I think we said in commentary that they didn't look particularly comfortable off the start, and so on. I know you've got a few mates in there.
Yeah, yeah. I think for the Leander crew. So my understanding is that they've had quite a disrupted season. They've got the whole crew is incredibly full of incredibly talented oarsmen, and they've recently had trials, so they've been in pairs and stuff like that. And I think they've actually they had limited time in the 8 coming into. I'm not trying to make excuses for them at all.
Yeah,
but they still did an incredible job and were very quick. But leading up to the head of the river race, which is ultimately what they're preparing for, I think they'll get a lot quicker. And then the other thing is, like, we saw some pretty dodgy conditions on the tideway on Sunday.
yeah.
And perhaps when you're not used to it, or I don't know how much water time they've actually had with because the Thames would have been unrowable even up at the Henley stretch. I don't know how well they dealt with the waves. But I mean, it's exactly the same for the Oxford crew, right? Like, they're training on the same river, and perhaps they would have, found a different way to get on the water. But the crew didn't deal with it that well.
I don't know. You won't necessarily know this, Angus, but I'm imagining that Oxford have another fixture against Oxford Brookes, who beat Cambridge on Sunday. Although I gather Cambridge were nearly a length clear, and then there was a bit of sort of steering stuff went on, and Oxford Brookes took advantage of it. I guess that fixture, if it's going to happen, could really be a pointer to what's going to happen in the boat race.
Yeah, it could do. I don't know if they actually have this fixture or not. The logical time for it to be would be not this weekend, but the weekend after. So, if any viewers are based on the tideway, keep an eye out for that one. Now, I think, like I said earlier, it's very difficult to know what to take from these fixtures. So, for instance, and because you race them at different points, you race the same crew at different points in your preparation. So, if you take my year, for example, Cambridge raced Brookes, I think, before us. Yes, because we raced the Brookes crew 3 weeks before the race. So I think they'd raced them a few weeks earlier than that. And particularly the last couple of weeks leading up to the boat race, when you have less academic pressure because term ends, and perhaps you're training on the tideway more, you can improve vastly. So it's quite difficult, if Oxford do get to race that Brookes crew, it's very difficult to know what to make of that. And like I said, literally anything can happen on the in the boat race, which is part of the charm of it. So
yeah. Did you beat Brookes that year then in 22?
So actually, no. Although it was a very similar fixture to what we saw on Sunday. We so actually, my Blue Boat WhatsApp group was lighting up when the Leander fixture was going on, and Liam Corrigan, our bowman, was saying, he pointed that out. So it was very like our Brookes fixture. We had 2 guys out with COVID, and we brought in one of the guys who was in last year's Blue Boat, James Forward, We nickname him Jimbo. Shout out to Big Jimbo. And he caught a massive boat stopper in the second piece after a bit of clashing. We lost that, but I think like I say, these challenges just present themselves to you, and it's literally, I think the boat race is literally all about mental toughness, just to deal with whatever challenges present to you on race day, and then also the physical challenge of it as well, because the boat race, you go off and do a 2K, and then you keep going at 2K pace for another 10 minutes. It feels like that.
You mentioned mental toughness. You've had a very long and distinguished rowing career. Where do you get your mental toughness from? Have you ever wondered that?
I don't know. It's part of it is just I think so. When you do really tough training, like we've done for years in the GB squad, it's a bit of sink or swim, and if you just get on with it, then you're more likely to survive and actually do well. So I think I built up a lot of it because of that. And I mean, so when I was a junior, we had this coach, Nick Carter, who you might know from the Molesey scene. He's a bit of a character, shall we say?
Yeah.
And we had a really good group of juniors down at Walton with a ridiculous record, getting people into GB junior system. And I just remember doing some really hard training as a 16-year-old. We had this 9K time trial, which is down around the island at Walton that we do every Sunday. And Nick would offer no sympathy. He had blisters. It was cold. It was really cold, and I think that probably gave me a bit of mental fortitude as well.
One of the things the squad do, which in terms of survival, when people say that, I always tend to think of the camp in the Sierra Nevada, the altitude camp. How did you survive that?
So part of it is home comforts, and
what
so just taking what we used to call them naughties. So just bringing a bit of chocolate, some sweets, and just taking a part of your day just to have a bit of enjoyment, because it's a pretty bleak place, right? The air is super dry. You're erging probably about 40k a day, doing 2 big weight sessions and not sleeping very well, and so you got to have something to brighten up your day. I think the other thing is about that camp too. We had to. I found I dealt with it a lot better when I literally just ticked off each session and not really think about how much time of the camp is left. Because you think, if you get to day 3 and you've still got another 13 days left of camp, it becomes a bit overwhelming. Whereas you just think, oh, I've got this session next, and you literally just don't think beyond the next session, then the camp tends to go a lot quicker and you could get to the end of it in pretty good shape.
I know it's been an incredibly important part of British squad's preparation for World and Olympic Championships. So I'm very mindful when I ask this. I mean, the answer is probably no. But do you think it's too hard, that camp, in the sense of, I don't know, stuff like possible injuries or the toll it takes on athletes?
I think it's largely about how you manage individual athletes. It's a lot of training, but we actually do more training when we go to the South Africa or Namibia camp, as it was in latter years. So, and we actually got less injuries there. I think it's probably about individual recovery, to be honest. I think, one of the biggest things about that place was that the air was so dry, and you could barely get any sleep because of it. You'd find it really hard to breathe. You wake up in the middle of the night just gasping for breath. So I think part of that is on the individual to be able to know their bodies and know, to when to maybe back off on the splits. And some of it is also for the coaches to monitor and be like, which I don't think they did at times. Have a look at individual athletes and be like, right, this guy's, perhaps in a couple of days going to be an absolute hole. We've got to tell him to pull back on the reins a bit.
Yeah. Who was the best in the squad in your time in judging, when to go hard and when to ease off? Who judged that to perfection?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I think the guys with the massive lung capacities probably dealt with that very well. So, like your Mo and your Tom Georges. But I was one of the slower guys, particularly in the aerobic stuff. So, and there's always a bit of a pressure to, like, particularly up there, you had to get your UT2 under 150 splits on the ergo.
Yeah.
And that takes a massive toll out of you. And some of these bigger guys with these massive aerobic capacities, it was a bit easier. So it's difficult to say. I think, although one person actually springs to mind was Pete Lambert. I thought he was pretty good at that. And partly because of his attitude. I think he knew his body pretty well, and he knew that he was one of the slowest on the ergo, so he just kind of embraced that a bit. He didn't like back off on purpose, but he just like, well, the expectation is that I'm not going to do this, so I'm just going to do my own thing, and he dealt with that pretty well.
So be you like 149.9s, and I'll just stick at that.
Yeah, and we got our blood lactate taken every single erg. And,
so what was yours then?
So for normal range, it's supposed to be under 2.
Yeah.
And, on some of the ergs, it can get up to like 6, which is what you'd be looking at for, but it wouldn't feel like that because, down at sea level, you could get to 6 millimolar lactate doing like a 1K piece at race pace. But, you just feel like doing a UT2 erg, but your lactate would just shoot up. It was really weird.
Yeah. What's the highest lactate you've ever registered?
I think it was 24 millimole.
24. Wow, that's insane.
It was doing a 5K test, and I was ill, so I shouldn't have done it. I blew really badly.
Why did you do it?
I think so. I think it was the 2020 season, and I felt quite a lot of pressure for selection to produce a score. And so Jürgen was still the coach at this point, and I think my season hadn't been going that way well, and he wanted me to see a score from me. So I just thought, I'll just get on and do it. And I was really sick afterwards, and I would like, that was very unlike me. I normally can keep my breakfast down after these hard ergs. I really want to put myself in the bin, but that particular time, it just the other thing that like really makes my lactate go up was heat as well. Like I remember in the at the Sarasota World Champs in 2017. I was in a double with Graham Thomas, and we did we were doing the heat, and we did the second 1K at rate 40, and I was pretty cooked after that one. I remember after half an hour of warming down on the bike after the race, my lactate was still at 12. but it was still like 40 degrees, and I think it just, I don't know, just not being able to clear it, it just it really affects your recovery.
Why didn't you make the final there in that championships as we're talking about it?
Yeah, that's a funny one. So Graham and I were both we done hip rehab for most of the year. I'd had surgery on both hips, and I think Graham had it on one. So we were training together in a double. Perhaps didn't have that much time together. We didn't get to race any of the World Cups together, and you know we probably should have been a lot faster than we were. In the semi-final, we came up against that French double who won the 2020 Olympics. That was they were in our semi, and I remember at that time they were blowing really hot and cold. One race they'd be like, as they are now, like super quick, and another race they'd be just completely off the boil. And in that I remember that semi they were super quick, and then they didn't get a medal in the final.
Yeah. So when you were rowing towards the end of the career, you mentioned those 2 hip operations. Were you like the Bionic Man?
No. Well, there was people in much worse state than me. We had a really good physio in the latter years of our physio throughout the GB squad was very good for me, but I got on particularly well with the physio towards the latter end, called Steve Leonard, or Big Steve as he's known. He's currently the physio at the intensive rehab unit at Bisham. And he was an ex-pro rugby player. He just knows his stuff, particularly for rehab. And we just got into a bit of a routine of managing my injuries really well. I actually got towards the end of my rowing career in the GB squad. I actually got the most water time than perhaps any of the other seasons.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
But I think that was down to like having a really strong robustness program.
Yeah. What does that mean?
So daily exercises that just stave off injuries. So whether it might be daily exercise just to keep your hips loose, keep your back loose. And I'm sure the GB squad do it now. It's not the most interesting thing in the world to do, but I mean, if it keeps you rowing and it keeps you fit, then it's pays off.
How much were you struggling to row in 22 in the Oxford boat race crew because of stuff going on with your body?
So a lot is a short answer. I mentioned this robustness thing. It was holding me together for the Olympics. When you have a full academic schedule and you're training at either end of the day, you just don't have the time to do this. And I think that led to one thing or another. And my hip got really inflamed in my back, and that was causing problems with my back. And then I eventually, actually in that Brooks fixture that we mentioned earlier, I slipped the disc.
No.
And so much so that in the week leading up to the race, I couldn't sit down to have my dinner.
What?
we had quite a funny story. So before the boat race, a couple of days before the boat race, the umpire, which was Matthew Pinson, comes and talks to the crews individually. About how he's going to umpire the race, and there's a chance to ask him any questions about how he's going to umpire. I think it's particularly valuable for the Coxes. And he comes in, and all the crew sit down, and I'm standing up, and he just looks at me and says, "You want to sit down?" I'm like, "No, I'm fine, thanks." But no, I was in a bit of a mess, to be honest.
Were you worried about racing?
I was, yeah. I was out of the crew for the Tuesday, and the race was on the Sunday.
Yeah.
And I I knew that I could row because it was fine to row. It was more the outside of the boat, and I'm sure the rowing wasn't doing it much good, but I knew I could at least get through the race. And part of the one of the challenges for me that week was just, impressing on the rest of the crew that I was fine. I was okay enough to row. I think they knew I was pretty bad, but
were you believable?
Well, apparently so.
Yeah. We rowed with, we won a bronze in 91, the 8 I was in, with a guy called Anton Obholzer, who's Rupert's big brother.
Yeah.
And basically that did his back. Like he couldn't ever go into a rowing boat again. So the question I'm wondering to myself is, how much did that affect what you could do going forward? The fact you carried on rowing, or was it something that had happened before that would have had an impact?
So, sorry, what?
Should you have stopped rowing for your own personal health?
Probably yes. It was a bit of stupidity, but I think the other part of this is that it's just the emotion of the occasion. I'd had this earmarked as my last race, and I wanted to I wanted to do. It was a personal ambition of mine to actually do the race. I was always, throughout that week, I was always asking myself the question, like, am I going to impact the crew, and or is my ability to row compromising the speed of the crew? And where I landed on race day and the day before was no, not yet. So that's ultimately the decision.
How did you know that?
I think it was more just, through training and through the pieces, it didn't really hurt, and I wasn't. I could still row at full length. I could still produce the power that we needed. So
the reason I asked that question earlier was because I know from what we said at the weekend that you subsequently had an operation, and the verdict was no more rowing ever, which I thought, shit.
No, it has like, part of that is, I mean, I'm sure I could get on the erg. I can just about now. But part of it is more, that was, I was in bed for a month after the race. I could do nothing but lie flat on my back, and I'm at that point I didn't really know, if I was actually going to be able to, live a normal life.
Bloody hell.
Because I went for an injection, strong epidural injection, and it did absolutely nothing. So the last roll of the dice really was the surgery, and luckily it worked. And I had some fantastic doctors that were able to do that for me. But so part of that decision, not wanting to row, is I don't want to. That was a horrific situation. I don't want to put myself in that again, just in case it's not that stable. So, and plus the fact I've done rowing. I want to do some other things in my life.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. This is a tough question. If you had in the future a daughter or a son who was going to row for a university and was in a similar position to you, should you do this race or should you not? What would your advice be?
Yeah.
And indeed, what did your mum and dad say? Did they have any impact into this?
Yeah, I think. Well, they didn't. I don't think they knew the full extent of.
Oh, I see.
Neither did I. I mean, I was still able to walk around and stuff at the time, but then afterwards they were pretty horrified. So I mean, I would like my future children to be able to row and enjoy the sport that I did.
Yeah.
But if I guess, I mean, I hope at that point we know a bit more about these common injuries that that people get.
Yeah.
But I guess perhaps one bit of advice is just keep doing stretching, keep keep your robustness up. And just look after yourself. But that's very easy to say because in hindsight, because at the time I was just you're just a bit of a one-track mind, and you want to get the results, and you want to do have these experiences racing. And
how well were you managed by Sean Bowden, your coach,
for the injury?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, pretty well. I was pretty open with him. The physio that I was saying was pretty open with him. Look, he's got, his job was to ensure that the 8 was the fastest as possible on race day, and each session we had to have a frank discussion about if I was okay enough to go in the boats, and part of my job was convincing him and explaining to him that I was okay to row, and I'm hoping that I put across the evidence to him that I was able to do it. Sean is an absolutely fantastic coach, and he's had his own back problems, and so I think he's got a bit of sympathy with that. But equally, he knows perhaps what impact that could have on the boat. So I think he did a good job, and ultimately we won. So
I mean, I know every seat in the boat race is important, and Liam Corrigan, who stroked the USA in Tokyo, was up in the bow seat, but you landed in the 7th seat, so you were in a key seat. Why did Sean put you in that seat? Because you were a sculler turned into rowing, so there must have been something that he saw in you that was like, wow, I'm gonna put Angus in the 7th seat.
I think, well, I mean, certainly wasn't the length that I was rowing, because I was probably one of the shortest in the boat. But no, I switched between the bow seat and the 7th seat leading up to the race, and I guess I was probably one of the natural leaders in the squad.
What does that mean?
Well, I was one of the ones probably driving how we wants to row, or wanted to approach the team dynamics, I guess, more than the actual race, because there was guys in there, and particularly in the squad, who had experience of the race and the race on the tideway. We had the rest of the stroke siders as well. We had three of us scullers, actually.
Barnaby,
Roman, and myself. And I think Barnaby, he was always destined for the middle of the boat, because he's got a phenomenal engine.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that perhaps was the reason why I was selected in the 7th seat was I had a really good connection with Tobias Schroeder, who was our stroke man.
Yeah.
And I think we created a pretty good rhythm as a unit. So I think that made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Talk to me about what it's like. You mentioned leadership, to lead a boat with so many incredible rowers who have gone, Roman's gone on to win the world title in the pairs. I don't know whether you cried tears for Tom George and Ollie Wynne-Griffith at that result, but because he was obviously your Oxford crewmate. Liam Corrigan's in this US4 that's going really fast. I think they took the silver medal last year. the Australian lad, is it James Chapman? He got the
Jack Robertson.
Jack Robinson, sorry, he got the bronze in the 8 last year for the Aussies. So leadership in a boat with all those people in is quite a quality to have, I think.
Well, I think perhaps I just had maybe a bit more experience than, or perhaps say Roman and Barnaby, because we've been rowing against each other for years and years and years. But I was the oldest in the boat, which perhaps helped. I think, and perhaps I had the most tideway experience as well, which was another thing. The rest of the guys in the boat are phenomenal. I love them to bits. They, aside from being really good rowers, they were just really good people, and they're some of my best mates. And I think one of the key things that we spoke about as a crew, and one of the lessons actually I learned from the Tokyo quad, was just the good teams work when each member of the crew feels valued in what they bring. And that's something that we spoke about before. We used to meet up every Tuesday evening at Jack Robertson and Charlie Elwes's flat, and we got a whole load of pizzas in, a couple of beers, and we'd speak about the week as a crew, and perhaps we'd watch an old boat race. But we literally used to sit around in a circle and would tell each other, like, would be just brutally honest with each other, what we valued about what other people, what everyone brought to the crew, and what we thought that each other could do better. And I think having been open and honest bred this atmosphere of trust, I guess. Because I think I see the boat race as the ultimate test of teamwork. It's really. I was having this discussion with my my partner the other day. The boat race and the 2K racing are quite. They're really interesting because they're very different in how you approach them. I think a 2K international race, it's more about performance, and you can prepare all you like, but you have to get it right on the day, and there's kind of less variables that can go wrong. There are challenges that present themselves, like you might have bad weather or whatever, but you're in individual lanes, so there's no chance of clashing. It's going to be a clear lake. If there's weed in it, they'll delay racing until they clear the weed and stuff like that. So it's really how you approach the race is, can you have it's essentially a 2K time trial, but you're just doing it alongside other people. Whereas in a boat race, it's a lot longer. So you have to have perhaps more trust in your crew that whatever challenges get thrown at you, that bond between all of you is not going to get broken. And it's amazing. Like, you see it in all the alumni crews, Oxford and Cambridge. It has such this profound effect on them. And I think that's probably what it is. You have to have such trust in your teammates that in order to win.
Yeah. You mentioned Charlie Elwes a little earlier. What is it that makes him such a special oarsman?
Charlie's probably the most naturally talented rower that I've come across. He is not only phenomenally strong, but I think just the biomechanics, he's just built for rowing. He rows really, really long and really strong. And I think if you distill rowing down to its simplest form, that's what makes you go fast. I think the other thing that Charlie just doesn't overcomplicate things when it comes to racing, which I think is really good. And when we did all our seat racing, his crews were always the ones that were winning. So yeah, he's a phenomenal athlete.
How are you with nerves? And I'm asking that question in particular in the context of, you know, Cambridge were obviously a really tasty crew. They had Ollie and Tom in the middle of the boat, and various other Olympians as well. How nervous were you, and how did that work for you as the race came closer, and indeed on race day itself?
It's the boat race was a really funny one, because you obviously feel nervous, but I didn't feel nervous as I had done in some races, and I think some of that was down to preparation, or I think a lot of it was down just to the level of preparation. I think what Sean really excels at, and I hope the guys from the fixtures saw this, is preparation for that race. And it's amazing the week leading up to it, what you do. You think, you know, it's the week leading to the race, you've got to taper, but actually that week is filled with other bits of preparation, whether it's just discussions or how you think about the race. That's where he really excels, and I think that's where he often wins boat races. Perhaps he's got some things slightly wrong in the past couple of years, but that's ultimately why he is the most successful boat race coach in history. So to go back to your original question, we felt like we prepared so well that we were just excited for the race, and we felt like we didn't have anything to lose, and we'd kind of built this mental state. I mentioned those Tuesday evening sessions where we would talk about how we wanted to approach the race and stuff, and I think we were just in the state of mind where we were happy for anything to come our way, but we knew exactly what we were going to do, and we just wanted to put it out there. So yeah, it also it allowed us also to enjoy the race a lot more. And perhaps the bits before it. So, you know, paddling down below Putney Rail Bridge and soaking up the warm up, and when we did our burst, we're like, oh wow, this is going to be great. So, whereas other 2K races, I remember, like for instance, the 2019 World Champs were I was in a quad, and
the B final.
In the B final, yeah. I remember being so nervous for that race, and I think some of that was because we just didn't necessarily have a clarity as a crew on how we were going to row, and our preparation probably hadn't been the best leading up to that race. So we hadn't been able to build confidence. So I felt a lot more nervous in those races where I didn't feel that confident.
Was it first two through to the Olympics in that B final?
Yeah.
That was guaranteed to produce a bit of nerves.
Yeah, those Olympic qualification years are always. I always watch the B finals in those because they're often the best races. One of the in the 2015 World Champs, I remember watching the men's double in the B final, and that was top Walton 5 crews. So there was only one. And it was a blanket field until 30 meters to go when the Norwegian crew dropped off the back. They're amazing races to watch.
I kind of I'm just conscious of where we are in terms of chatting, and there's loads of stuff I want to talk to you about. So I would go on to talk about the boat race, but I'm kind of going to pivot a bit and say, I guess from your career now, you'd always had an intention of calling time after Tokyo, but you waited until I think April of 2022 before announcing it.
Yeah, I think part of it was just I think that was just the media team.
And the
GB rowing team more than anything. The other thing was I still felt like I was still rowing, being rowing in the boat race squad. So I didn't feel like that was the time to announce it when I was still in the rowing world. But no, like I said, I'd always kind of planned to stop rowing after Tokyo, and some of that is just because I felt like I'd done it long enough, and I want to go explore different things in my life.
We talked at the weekend, which I very much appreciated, and you were very honest about your struggles, your challenges on stopping rowing. And maybe you could say a bit about how that manifested itself and how you feel, how well you feel or not well you've dealt with that.
Yeah, so I found stopping rowing very hard, as I know that a lot of people do. And I think one of the biggest challenges that stopping rowing that comes with stopping rowing is rowing is such a time demanding activity, and particularly when you do it full time, that you don't actually have the time to work out what you actually like doing when you haven't got rowing in your life. Or you can to some extent, but not. So when rowing is ripped away from you, or when it's removed from your life, you end up with having so much time that you've got no idea how to fill it, and you don't know how much to. So you try some different stuff, and but you don't know how much time to spend doing those activities. And it's actually, I found planning my days very, very difficult. I think the other thing is it was because it was so all encompassing. I felt that my identity was Angus the rower rather than Angus the anything else. So when that's removed, I didn't really feel like I was anyone. And I went from being the top of one sport down to the bottom of something else, and that was my choice. I accepted that, but it's still it's very you don't quite know how to view yourself, and as a result, I felt like a bit of my self-confidence it plummeted quite a bit, and I'm not ashamed to say I went and sought help because of it, and because it was how I was reacting to it. I went into my shell massively. It was having a big effect on the loved ones around me, and I'm doing a lot better now, but it's as things, everyday life becomes a lot more normal. But it's very challenging to have something that's all encompassing of your life and having to almost start again. It felt like I almost went back to when I was 14 before I started rowing. It felt like I massively regressed. But it's, and also a lot of my peers who perhaps didn't row or had stopped rowing a long time ago were like this far ahead, and I didn't feel like I was quite ready to be, at their point in life yet. It was a very strange feeling, but like I say, it's getting easier as time goes on.
That's a remarkable story, Angus, and you've been remarkably open with it. I'm just wondering. I had a question that, could you have? I guess the answer is obviously yes. Could you have sought help sooner?
Yeah, definitely.
And what stopped you?
A part of it was just denial, and I needed it, or I thought, perhaps it was a bit of stubbornness that I could deal with it on my own. But it was. I think part of it was also just my character and my reaction to it. It was, when it's, I just, when I didn't know quite what to make of those feelings, I just retreated inside myself and perhaps didn't open up to the idea of seeking help.
Yeah, I mean, I've been through psychological problems, anxiety, and breakdown, pretty much, depression. And sometimes people would say, I don't think they were particularly empathic comments, but what have you got to worry about? You've got an Olympic gold medal, and you've got a family and a house and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes you kind of turn that in on yourself because you have been so successful. I mean, I wonder, is that something you did?
Yeah, I think it's very hard to know what to make of it, and I found it very difficult doing rowing events after that. Going and appearing at rowing events, because you had no idea about your self-worth, because these rowing events, you were like put on this pedestal.
Yeah.
And everyone was kind of celebrating you or whatever, if you're like one of these, a guest of honor or whatever. And then the very next day, I was back to the lab again. I was I was nameless and faceless and stuff like that. And it was that sharp contrast. I didn't really know my self-identity. It was very hard to work it all out.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think the immediate contrast, because I guess in 2021, you were obviously ecstatic after your Olympic final, where I know you exceeded expectations in that race.
Yeah. So I mean, we exceeded our expectations as well. We knew that we were going pretty well coming into that regatta. We in the final 2K piece that we did before flying out to Tokyo, as a squad, we got the highest gold medal time, highest percentage. We did 5:37 on Flat Lake, which was and it felt phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so we knew it was one of the hardest events, I think, at the time, because that Dutch crew were and are phenomenal, and the Italians we knew were going to be ridiculously tough. We had no idea about the Australians because no one had raced them over COVID. But yeah, we knew that we were pretty fast. We because we got in that medal in Lucerne as well. So I kind of said to the others, or it was expressing a thought that I'd had, look, if I get a medal, or if we get a bronze, like that, I would feel like that's a gold. Because that was kind of where I thought we were at, which I think everyone kind of agreed with. So that was kind of our expectation and our aim. So obviously when we got the silver medal, it was like, whoa, it's just way beyond what we thought. But
How impacted were you by other results in the British team going on around you?
To be honest, we had no idea what was going on.
That's interesting.
Actually, no, that's not entirely true. We knew when we boated for the final, we saw the men's double come past, and we saw that they came fourth, and then I think the women's four came past, and we saw that they were in contention for a medal, and then the men's four were the race before us, so we had no idea. What happened to them.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, nothing really changed in terms of how we thought. We kind of went into that race of we knew we were going well, and the warm up felt really good. And we'd spoken before the race that we got nothing to lose, and because no one expects anything of us, which is a very freeing feeling, and it reminded me a lot of how I felt when I was just breaking into the team.
Oh,
because
really?
yeah, and I think that's often the crews that perform the best probably have that mindset. They just throw caution to the wind a bit, and fortune favors the bold, doesn't it? I think I certainly felt like the times that I performed the best was when I took all expectation off myself and was like, well, I'm just going to go and do my very best. And that was the thing that Jack always used to say when I was in a crew with him, just like leave nothing to chance.
Yeah.
And I think on the BBC commentary for our race, Cracknell said we took a risk. We didn't feel like we took a risk.
Yeah.
It was we were like, we just don't want to hold back anything.
Yeah.
And we felt like we didn't. I mean, Tom Barris certainly didn't. He was on another level that race. Perhaps a level that we hadn't seen before. He hadn't tried in any of the races until like the last 100. But you could certainly feel he was trying from the word go in that race.
I know, because I had to watch it again because I read something, where you said we led for a lot of the race, and I thought, no, they didn't. And then I watched it again and thought, bloody hell, it's the British bows that are up in front there for a lot of that race. And I guess it's one thing to say leave nothing to chance, but then the execution of that, I mean, to be able to do that technically and sweetly, because the quad is such a, responsive boat. It's not as simple as saying, well, we'll just blast out, because if you blast out, you're going to kill the boat potentially.
Yeah, I think we practice starts a lot because from our previous races, that was a bit of our Achilles heel. And so we'd spent quite a long time thinking about the technique of the start and being really efficient with it, or how to really apply the power and still be clean. And I think for the majority of the race, we kind of had two technical points that I was doing the race calls.
Were you?
And yes, yeah, and or certainly until the last 500 when Harry Leask he burst into life.
Oh wow!
He's normal, like he doesn't say a word until the last 500 of the race, where he just suddenly becomes animated and just starts screaming at us. But we kind of just had a couple of technical focuses. I think one was just being really direct at the front end, just really placing the blades really sharply, really sweetly, and then the other one was just being really leg dominant on the drive. So just thinking about that all throughout our training leading up to that, I think that kind of improved our start no end. We were like, for us to be leading at the first 500, it was like, what?
Yeah. Was there ever a time in that race where you thought, shit, we might win this?
Yeah, probably like 1,300 meters. To be honest, there was quite a few boats that caught crab in that race. The only one that I really knew about was the Italians.
Yeah,
because they were obviously right next to us. I kind of knew that the Dutch were going to be pretty quick, but I thought, I knew that we had a pretty good last 500 as well. So it was just kind of game on. But I don't know. I'm not. I don't look back on that race and be like, oh, there was something else that we could have done.
Yeah.
And like I said, like how I came into that race, the silver feels like a gold medal to me, and that's how I feel about it. So I think that, like, I spoke again with Jack, who retired at the same time as me, and he feels exactly the same. And that was kind of one of the reasons why he stopped and didn't feel the need to go again. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
I know it. I know it's not luck that, you know, you were the crew, one of the crews that kept clean, and the Aussies, the Dutch, and the Italians all had issues with the water. What was it that gave you that ability to stay on top of the conditions?
I mean, my crewmates are probably just gobsmacked that I wasn't the one catching the crab for once. Because it was always me in training in pieces that was catching a crab. But to be honest, I think we were, like I said, those two technical focuses, we were just really, we'd been thinking about them for so long and had kind of built a whole rhythm around them. That we just, that probably keeps you don't worry about the waves then. I felt I wasn't really worried about the waves because I was thinking about that so much. Like like I said earlier, for a 2K race, it's all about delivering a performance. So I just wanted to deliver the very best performance that I could possibly do, in every single stroke I wanted to be the best possible.
I think I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, you in that single sculls race where I saw your performance. I think you came fourth there, just missed a medal in the Europeans behind Tufter and Sinek, and who would it have been in the front of that?
Martin.
Oh, damn it, yeah. You beat the likes of Abrano and Grisconis, I seem to recall. Yeah. And I thought, okay, he's Britain's next Alan Campbell. He's going to be the next single sculler. Is that something that ever crossed your mind? And what happened to that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed racing my single at that stage. It was really cool. That race was a lot of fun. I was being coached by John West at the time, and we got on really well. I know that some of the other guys in the squad didn't, but we had a really good working relationship, and he gave me the confidence just to throw caution to the wind. I think that's the recurring theme. So I remember speaking to Jürgen before that regatta, and I was like, "Oh, Jürgen, what do you think? It's like a pretty good result." And he was like, "Okay, maybe top 10." So I was like, I just kind of took every race as it came, and I think the semi-final, I did my PB, and I was like, "All right, I just want to just keep getting PBs," because it was a fast course at Poznan. And then I kind of, that final, I didn't really. I was surrounded by blokes that were my heroes growing up. I used to love watching those single scull races, and I was like, "Oh God, I had a chance to take a pop at them now. I might not get another chance." But yeah, sorry to answer your question. So later that season, Charles Cousins got injured, and he was in the quad at the time, and they've been going really well. And I think the 2014 season they got on a silver at the World. So I thought,
by that much.
Yeah. I mean, they should have probably won that race. And I thought this could be my ticket to the Olympics. So I kind of put a lot of focus on that rather than single sculling is always the metric by which you're measured for trials. So I always wanted to do well in that.
Yeah.
But I did, after that regatta, I always wanted to have a bit of a pop at some of the other scullers. Like perhaps I would have loved to have at least been in a race with Mahe.
Yeah.
That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the other, I just like being, you watch these guys on TV and I just like being alongside them, alongside them.
I know Rio must have had a multitude of emotions for you with the illness. Was it with Graham before the regatta started? You ended up in the final and finished fifth. Was it great being at your first Olympics, or did that take the shine off it?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, going to an Olympic Games and becoming an Olympian was one of my ambitions throughout my career, and it was. Team GB are awesome at making you feel really special and like you've achieved that. So in some aspects, it didn't take that much of a shine off of it. But of course, when you go to the Olympics, you want to put your best foot forward and want to perform. And perhaps there was an expectation that we could get a medal. It was a funny Olympics because obviously we had Graham got ill, but that week my back was a bit of a mess as well. That was all coming from my hip.
Yeah.
If you've got a stiff hip, then your back has to do funny things to compensate for it. And so I was waking up at 4 a.m. every day just to go ice my back so I could do the Olympic final.
Oh wow.
So yeah, and then we really didn't row that well. I thought the preparation leading up to the games wasn't great. I didn't think, and it's something that I feel really sad about because there was some brilliant guys in that boat, like likes of Sam Townsend, the Shire horse.
Oh God, yeah.
And Pete Lambert, that was Pete's one and only Olympics, and that was Sam's last race. And I wish I could have, or we could have done better for them.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is I didn't really know what to make of it at all, because you kind of, I don't know how you felt, Crossy, when you did your Olympic final. Like you kind of build up in your head what it's going to be like, and then you realize it's just another 2K race.
Yeah.
And it just feels a bit surreal, and processing it all afterwards along with the result, I just felt a bit numb. But yeah, the Rio Olympics was an amazing experience in itself. Like I went and watched London as a spectator, and it had a very different feel about it.
Yeah.
Being in the third world country, and from an athlete's point of view, the Olympic Village in the second week was great fun. Some of the parties were insane, and the going and watching some of the other sports was we got access that we perhaps shouldn't have. The security was pretty lax, so
yeah,
you got accreditation, and it's literally just got an A on it for athlete, and I think the security didn't realise that it's got to have like a letter afterwards that nominates your sport. So we literally just jumped on the athlete's bus to any venue that we wanted, went and sat in the athletes area to watch whatever sport, and got free tickets to absolutely everything, which was amazing. Like we could go and went and watch like weightlifting, the athletics, and all this sort of stuff. So and obviously we couldn't do that in Tokyo because of COVID, and I mean the security would have been a lot tighter there. So it was I've got kind of mixed memories of Rio, but I'd say probably overwhelmingly positive, I'd say.
Yeah, that's good. We've been talking for over an hour now, nearly an hour and 10, Angus, and it's been sensational, I think, to listen to you describe your experiences. I'm just wondering, maybe we'll draw things to a close. What are your plans for this summer Olympic year?
Well, if I'm going out to watch?
Yeah, anything like that.
No, well, so I'm not going to the Olympics to watch. I haven't got tickets, but yeah, I'm well. The biggest event in my
Oh,
summer is I'm getting married. So that'll be wedding planning is
August the
I'd say
31st?
it's going a lot better now. It was I think perhaps I wasn't doing enough of it. And she was taking a bit more on than me, but so that's very exciting. But in terms of rowing, I missed Henley last year, but partly because that was when our holiday was, and also I didn't want to. I was feeling. We spoke a bit earlier
Yeah.
about struggling with rowing events, and I wanted to remove myself a bit from that environment. But I'm really excited to go to Henley this year. So you know, if you need a commentary buddy,
Yeah.
Crossy, then you know you got my number.
I know. I will be in touch with Sarah Winklis about that. Have no fear. I think we'll end the live part of this interview now. It's been amazing listening to you, Angus, articulate your experiences so openly and honestly, and you know, there's been a nice intensity, but you're a very relaxed kind of guy when you talk, which has been great to experience. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Crossy.
Bye now, everybody.
Bye bye.